Hello everybody, the next plane off the pile is a Stanley Bedrock 607 joiner plane. Let's take a look at it. The 607 is a real workhorse. This flat bottom 607 was made between 1900 and 1943. Stanley stopped making the corrugated 607s in 1935. The old plane is 22 inches long and has a 2 3/8 inch wide iron. And somewhere buried underneath the rust on that iron is a nice old Sweetheart trademark. The 607 is used where joining long boards together needs precision, and it's also used for smoothing up large flat surfaces. The longer your plane, the flatter your surface is going to be. The book value on a 607 ranges between $225 and $450. The later model Bedrock planes have 3 screws at the back of the frog. The left and the right hand side loosen the pin that holds the frog to the base, and the center one adjusts your frog forward and back. The earlier round top Bedrocks, and that's referring to the sides right there, don't have that same adjustment. The round tops are identical to the Bailey planes. And both the flat top and the round top are sought after by collectors, and they're very good planes to use. Time to break her down. And there's all the parts. She's broken down and still looking really good. All the wood looks good. No nicks, no dings, no cracks anywhere on the metal. The only issue was I had to use a torch to get one of the screws out. I moved all the small parts to a plastic tub so I don't lose them. And now I'm going to use some simple green and a toothbrush to scrub the bottom and the frog in my deep sink. After cleaning the bottom and frog, it's good to see that almost 100% of the Japanning is there. The most loss is right there at the very front. Somebody did a touch up in the past ahead of the throat right here. And the frog has the normal loss around the outside edges. Other than that, the Japanning looks good. Next, I'm going to use the dental pick to pick at those small white paint specks and some 4/0 steel wool and go over the Japanning. Paint specks could be carefully removed with a dental pick. And then I lightly go over all the Japanning with the steel wool. And the frog gets the same steel wool treatment. And when the steel wool is done, it does look a little bit dull, but don't worry, it's going to come back. Next, I'm going to use the 150 grit paper on the sanding block and go around all these outside edges right here, all around the sides, the front, and the back. When you're doing this, you want to make sure you don't round the edges over. Next, I'll be using a combination of the sanding stick, the wire brush, and some steel wool. I'm going to clean up the machine surface right here where the frog mounts. First is the sanding stick. You want it to be perfectly flat on that machine surface. I only go one direction, up and down, and you can see the color change when it starts to shine up. That's what we're looking for. Sometimes these old worn out wire brushes actually work out better. The new one though gets down into that groove better. And then finish it up with some steel wool. And that's got her looking pretty good. And now it's time to use my scraper on all of the flat surfaces, and I mean all of them. The underside of the frog, the top side of the frog, the iron both sides, the iron cap, only the top side because the bottom was blued, and the lever cap. I did a video where I showed you how to make these scrapers. The frog doesn't really need any scraping, no rust. The underside of the iron cap, I'm going to use one of my sanding sponges, one that's worn out quite a bit. Not a lot of bluing left on here, but what little there is, we want to make sure that it lasts. Now I'm going to do the left and the right hand sides of the bottom with that 150 grit sandpaper on a sanding block. That paper is not brand new and fresh. I don't want to start scratching this up. This old plane is pretty nice and clean. Lapping these sides would be overkill, and it'd also be a lot of work. I finished the sides by going over it lightly with some 1000 grit paper. Here's a look at the left side when it's done. There are some very minor pitting that's still there, not a whole lot. And this is the right side. The right side I'd say is perfect. She looks really good. And now comes the moment of truth when I figure out if the bottom is flat. To do that, I'll be using 150 grit paper on my lapping station. I'll give it a couple runs back and forth like this. So I've done about 30 strokes across the lapping station, and I can see where it has touched metal the whole way from one end to the other. So I'm not going to lap anymore. I'm going to finish this up with some 150 grit on the sanding block. My whole focus here is just cosmetic. There's some places that are dark, some that are light. I'm going to those dark spots. I'm going to lighten them up. And with the 150 done, I'm going to lightly go over it with 1000 grit. And now that's a pretty good looking bottom right there. She's all done. And with the bottom pretty much done, it's time to touch up the missing Japanning. Only put the touch up paint on the bare metal. Try not to overlap the Japanning that's already there. That's it. Going to clean up the bottom of the frog on my lapping station. Hold it flat. The lapping station ultimately reveals how these things are not totally flat. There's low spot here, and there's the bottom. You can see where the machining was not exactly perfect. So you don't need to lap it all the way down. Just going to finish this up with a sanding block or the sanding stick. The sanding stick also works great for cleaning up the lateral adjustment lever. I'm going to finish the lateral adjustment lever on my wire wheel. Same with the depth adjustment bolt. And that looks nice. Looks like there's a pretty thick coat of lacquer remaining on the tote and knob, so I got to try to save that. And with the paint specks gone, I'm going to go over them lightly with my sanding sponge. This is a worn out sponge. And with the sanding sponge done, it's on to the 4/0 steel wool. And after finishing the steel wool, I can buff a nice shine back to those by using that blue paper towel right there. And they'll look even better after I wax them. But before the waxing, I'm going to put a new decal on the side of this tote so it looks like it did when it was new. And now it's on to my sandblaster to clean up the back side of the lever cap. Then it's on to the wire wheel. And then I lap the leading edge right here. Want to make sure it makes perfect contact with the cap iron. And I'm going to use 150 grit paper on my sanding block to do the back of the spring, followed up with 1000 grit. There's just a little bit of pitting here that I want to make go away. And the back side is done. The front side looks pretty good already, so I'm going to see what I can do with a sanding sponge. This is one of the least aggressive ways to go about cleaning this up. This old sponge has seen a lot of use, so the grit is not aggressive and scratchy. And that worked pretty good. I'm going to finish it with 1000 grit on my sanding block. And she's done. The lever cap is ready for dirty oil. But first I want to do the iron cap so I can do all the dirty oiling at the same time. Earlier I mentioned that the iron caps are blued on the back side. That's the older style iron caps. So you don't want to remove the bluing. This is almost gone, but I used steel wool to clean that up. The other thing I did was I lapped this leading edge right here. It wants to fit perfectly flat on top of your iron so little chips don't get stuck up underneath it. I'm going to use 150 grit on my sanding block to do all the outer edges of the iron cap and the iron. And I'll use my sanding stick and a rolled up piece of sandpaper to get in the slot and that little hole right there. And now I can use either 150 grit paper on the sanding block, which I got a fresh piece on for this, or my lapping station to do the front and the back of the iron. Both the iron and the iron cap are in pretty good shape. That's why I'm just going with the sanding block. They don't always clean up this well with just the sanding block. This time it worked. A lot of times you got to take it on the lapping station. I'm going to finish them with the 1000 grit paper. It doesn't take a lot with this. And that's got them looking a lot better than what they were. And now it's time to break out the dirty oil rag. There's what's in the dirty oil rag. I'm going to completely coat the frog, the bottom, and the lever cap. And the dirty oil is applied, so it's time to go and lap the back of my iron and sharpen it. I just finished doing a video that shows you all the steps on how to sharpen your iron. And here's my general number 810 chisel and plane iron sharpener. So now we can see the iron looks pretty, but this is where looks don't matter. I'm really looking forward to taking this old girl for a test drive, but first I got to clean up all these dirty old small parts. First is the 9 screw slots. I'm going to use the dental pick and some folded up and layered sandpaper. I use the dental pick to clean out the initial crud. If nothing else, it prevents the sandpaper from gumming up. And I finished it with sandpaper that's folded to fit tight in the slot. A piece of cut off sanding sponge works really good in a depth adjustment knob. And it's on to the wire wheel. And with the small parts all cleaned up really nice, it's time to give them a coat of the rim oil. And with everything done, the only thing left to do is to wipe off all the oils and give everything a coat of wax. With the oil wiped off and a nice coat of wax applied, this little girl is ready to be put back together. And there she is, my first baby of the new year. Today's January 1st, 2018. What a way to bring it in. I think this old girl is ready to be put to work. Let's take a look down the right side and a look from behind. This old girl is going to make somebody a really nice plane. But I'm done messing around. It's time to take her for a test drive. And for this test drive, I've got a 2 3/8 inch wide piece of cherry. Same width as what the iron is. Wow, this is kind of like work. That's enough for me. She passed the test. And there she is with the last shaving still coming out of her throat. That 2 3/8 of an inch wide cherry is some pretty wide stuff to be planing, but this plane is up for the task. The old 607 looks great. She works great. I got nothing bad to say about her. It's a really nice plane. Hopefully it'll go to a good home. Well, that's it for today. Who knows what's next off the pile? I gotta look and see, but until then, it's time for supper. Bye.